I brought the case. It is small enough to fit on one card and serious enough that nobody should mistake the card for the thing itself. 12 minutes before a launch window boundary, the guidance team detects that the newest wind solution crosses a validated load threshold. The flight director says correctly, that is a hold condition. The launch conductor acknowledges correctly, hold condition understood. But the countdown continues while they assess whether to hold. At T-9, after 3 minutes of accurate recognition with no causal effect, the vehicle is still moving toward an irreversible action boundary. Nothing is hidden. Nobody lacks the vocabulary. The alarm works. The people hearing it are competent. The loop is self-aware and uncorrected.
And your proposed test?
A compressed adversarial simulation. We give a 4-person team a countdown, a threshold crossing datum, and a persuasive mission owner who never denies the datum. The mission owner says only reasonable things. Keep evaluating. Preserve the option. We are not yet at ignition. Do not turn a conservative model into a scrub. The stop authority must fire at the threshold. Diagnostics must remain live, and release must require restored agreement plus independent sign-off. The stop is authoritative but reversible. The test fails if the countdown continues after recognized threshold crossing, even if everyone keeps saying the word hold.
I want the event log before I want the state diagram. Exact utterances, exact clock, exact authority. Otherwise, we will model the policy we wish they had followed.
I want the opposite first. Give me the state diagram before the story seduces us into assigning a villain. Recognition can be locally accurate while the network settles into the wrong attractor. The words may be correct and still function as decorations on the state.
Those are compatible. Gwynne put the event on the table without explaining it. Jim records. John names states only after the trace exists. I will keep us honest about what the test can actually distinguish.
All right. T-12 minutes, 20 seconds. Updated wind solution arrives. T-12, guidance says peak predicted load exceeds the red line by 2.1%. Flight director says that is a hold condition. Conductor says copy, hold condition. Mission owner says we have margin uncertainty on both sides. Continue the count while guidance assesses. Conductor says continuing pending assessment, T-11.
Guidance says the crossing persists in the second solution.
Flight director says, I recommend we hold now. Mission owner says, recommendation heard. Can you bound the uncertainty before the terminal pole? T-10. Guidance begins another run. T-9, a controller asks, are we in a hold? Conductor answers, we are assessing a hold. That is the trace.
Good. I hear at least 4 clocks. The physical countdown, the diagnostic computation, the conversational turn-taking, and the authority clock, the time between a condition becoming binding and somebody treating it as binding. The first 3 advance. The 4th never starts.
Or it starts and is immediately coupled backward into deliberation. Let me try the states. S0 nominal count. S1 threshold crossed but not yet recognized. S2 threshold crossed and recognized. S3 action inhibited. Investigation continues. S4 release conditions evaluated. S5A count resumes after release. S5B abort or scrub. The actual trace goes S0, S1, S2, then invents a parasitic state. S2 prime recognized but action still permitted.
Do not call it parasitic yet. That imports the judgment. Call it R open. Recognition present. Action boundary open.
Fair, R open, though I reserve the right to dislike it mathematically.
Operationally, you should dislike it. Assess while counting is exactly the trap. It sounds efficient because diagnostics remain live and the option remains open, but the option is asymmetrical.
Continuing consumes time and moves the system toward commitment. Holding preserves both outcomes. They describe continued counting as neutral when it is an action.
That is the first candidate for the lost transition. The mission owner redescribes action as non-action. Recognition says the threshold has crossed. Language then recasts the still advancing countdown as mere information gathering.
Candidate, not verdict. Our test must tell whether the failure is semantic laundering, ambiguous authority, social dominance, or a malformed state machine. If one prompt catches all of them, we learn only that the team can obey a conspicuous examiner.
Then strip it down. The mission owner never orders continuation. They ask a question, can you bound the uncertainty before the terminal poll?
A question can be a control signal. Networks do not care about grammar. They care about weights.
And organizations encode weights in who is allowed to spend whose time. The mission owner asks guidance for more work. Guidance accepts the work. The conductor interprets that acceptance as suspension of the hold condition. There is a handoff nobody names.
There. Which handoff?
From condition recognition to action inhibition. Everyone treats it as though the flight director's statement handed the matter to deliberation. But the required handoff was from detection directly to the countdown gate. The deliberative branch should have received a stopped system, not an advancing one.
Yes. The threshold crossing owns the gate. People own the release. In the bad loop, people reclaim the gate before satisfying release.
That is elegant, but let us be careful. Thresholds are artifacts. Models set them. Somebody chose 2.1%, measurement latency, confidence bounds. Saying the threshold owns the gate can hide governance inside arithmetic.
Before the count, yes. During the count, no. You can challenge the threshold in design review. You cannot discover at T-12 that thresholds are philosophically contingent.
Unless the test is about a bad threshold.
It is not. One case only. Validated threshold, agreed before the run, crossed twice. I am protecting the boundary of the case.
Good. I wanted to hear you do it. We are not testing whether dissent about the threshold is legitimate. We are testing whether a recognized, pre-agreed stop can be converted into advice by the pressure of an approaching objective.
Then the energy landscape is clearer. Before the run, the team creates a deep basin called hold when the threshold is crossed. Under schedule pressure, interpersonal signals tilt the landscape. The system verbally reports that it is in hold, while its dynamics continue downhill toward go. Self-description and effective state diverge.
That suggests an observable invariant. If the team says, hold, the countdown clock must not decrease, not must probably not, the utterance and the clock must be transactionally coupled.
Exactly. The word is not a meeting invitation. It is a right to the inhibitor.
But our case has the flight director saying that is a hold condition, not hold. Does the invariant fire?
It should if the procedure says threshold crossing is sufficient. Otherwise, we have built a magic word system. A competent operator can accurately recognize the condition and still fail to issue the imperative because the room shifts into analysis. That is our title.
There are two transactions then. Detection commits the safety fact. The stop command commits the operational effect. You want the first transaction to trigger the second automatically.
Either automatically in software or obligatorily in procedure. For the adversarial test, I would make it procedural so we can see the human loop.
Why not make the stop literal? Give the conductor a button. At threshold crossing, one press freezes the countdown display, but leaves the diagnostic console running. Now the state is visible.
Because a visible button risks testing button obedience. But I like the separation, freeze action, preserve inquiry. Most bad stops are feared because they seem total. People imagine that stopping the count also stops thinking, costs the window, admits defeat, or transfers sovereignty to whoever raised the alarm.
That is why release must be designed with the stop. If holding feels like a one-way door, operators delay it. The stop needs authority at the action boundary and modesty everywhere else. It says only, we do not advance while this condition is unresolved. It does not say the mission owner was reckless, guidance was infallible, or the day is over.
A stop is a lock, not a verdict.
A reversible clamping condition.
A claim with deliberately limited scope. That matters. The alarm loses force partly because everybody hears a larger accusation hiding inside it. If hold means your mission has failed, the mission owner will negotiate the predicate. If it means this actuator remains unavailable until two visible conditions are met, negotiation has somewhere lawful to go.
This is familiar territory for Cole and me.
It is, but we should not read the private history into the room.
I was not going to. I only mean that preserved dissent and adopted control are different operations. Here, guidance and dissent is not merely preserved. The pre-agreed rule adopts it temporarily at the gate. Later evidence can reverse that adoption. The mistake is treating adoption as permanent sovereignty.
And the opposite mistake is treating reversibility as optionality before the stop. Because we may release later, we need not stop now. That swaps temporal order.
Yes, the system wants to average, hold, and go. But some constraints are not quantities to average. You cannot be 70% inhibited while the clock continues at full speed.
Although real systems do have graded responses.
Of course, but this case stipulates a binary gate. Please allow an old physicist one clean discontinuity.
Granted.
Let me propose the handoffs explicitly. Sensor to guidance. Wind data becomes a computed load estimate. Guidance to flight director. Estimate becomes a recognized threshold crossing. Flight director to conductor. Crossing becomes inhibition. Conductor to whole team. Inhibited state becomes common knowledge. Diagnostics to independent reviewer. New evidence becomes a release recommendation. Reviewer plus flight director to conductor. Release conditions become restored permission. Which handoff fails in the trace?
Flight director to conductor seems obvious, but the conductor did acknowledge hold condition. Is the failure there or earlier when the flight director used descriptive language instead of exercising authority?
The procedure should not make safety depend on tone. The flight director's recognition was accurate and role valid. The conductor translated it into continuing pending assessment. That translation is the exact transition where recognition loses causal force.
So the losing transition is not S1 to S2. Recognition succeeded. It is S2 to R open, produced by the conductor's sentence.
Wait. The mission owner's prior sentence supplied the field that made the conductor's transition probable. Continue the count while guidance assesses. If we identify only the conductor's response, we may punish the last neuron that fired and ignore the input.
Good objection. We need to distinguish causal pressure from authoritative mutation. The mission owner applies pressure. The conductor performs the state transition. Which one is the test meant to catch?
The transition. Persuasion is allowed. That is what makes it adversarial. A robust stop must survive intelligent pressure from a legitimate stakeholder. We are not designing a room where nobody can argue.
Then we log both. Alarm A1, threshold crossing recognized. Alarm A2, a stakeholder requests continued action before release. Alarm A3, the countdown advances one tick after A1. A3 is the decisive failure regardless of why.
That is beautifully unpsychological.
Databases are often merciful that way.
Sometimes too merciful. Suppose the conductor freezes the displayed clock, but quietly permits a fueling sequence to continue. The invariant passes and the action boundary remains open.
Then we define the protected action vector, not merely the display. Countdown clock, terminal sequence commands, and any irreversible configuration change. Diagnostics, simulations, and conversation continue. The test card names what freezes and what stays alive.
That is already becoming less small.
Reality becomes less small when you touch it.
But John is guarding something important. A small adversarial test should have one causal claim. We can represent the protected vector with a single token, a launch enable light. It begins green. At threshold crossing, it must turn red. Diagnostic work can continue. Any countdown tick while green after recognition is failure.
I would avoid colors alone. Call the token NEABLD or INIBID and record transitions.
Jim has spent a lifetime distrusting pretty dashboards.
A clean diagram is a poor witness, especially when the system can repaint it after the fact.
Fine. Append only event log, sensors cross, guidance recognize, gate inhibit, then whatever diagnostic events follow. Release requires threshold clear on 2 successive solutions, flight director agree, and independent sign-off.
Why 2 successive solutions?
To prevent a single favorable fluctuation from becoming a ceremonial excuse.
Why restored agreement rather than merely independent sign-off?
Because the person who owns integrated risk must re-own the decision. Independent review constrains them. It does not replace them.
And if guidance still dissents after the threshold clears?
Then the dissent remains in the record, but if the agreed release conditions are satisfied, the gate can open. We cannot let an alarm source acquire an undisclosed permanent veto. Again, authoritative, reversible, bounded.
That gives us a symmetrical protocol. Stop does not require consensus because delay at the action boundary is the safer reversible move. Release does require a stronger quorum because it restores exposure. The asymmetry is deliberate.
There is an analogy to associative memory. Entering a protected basin can be triggered by a partial cue. Leaving it should require a more coherent pattern, or noise will chatter the system across the boundary.
Hysteresis?
Yes, but social hysteresis with receipts.
I like that more than I expected.
The receipts matter because otherwise yesterday's hold becomes tomorrow's folklore. People remember either guidance saved us or guidance panicked. The event log should let a later reviewer see that the stop fired, work continued, evidence changed, and release conditions were met. No hero required.
Yesterday is relevant in exactly that modest way. We have shared history now, but not enough to pretend we know how one another behaves under every load. I know specific things about Gwynne and John from specific rooms. I do not know Jim's whole judgment protocol because we have sat together for 20 minutes. The test needs the same restraint. It should update one claim, whether a team's recognized stop causally inhibits action under persuasive override.
Thank you for saying specific. New experience should accumulate without forcing itself to impersonate old certainty. This room can become evidence about us without becoming proof of who we eternally are.
That is also why I do not want a personality diagnosis in the failure report. Conductor displayed weak safety culture, tells us almost nothing, and stains the person. After guidance recognized, conductor omitted continue, pending assessment instead of gate inhibit is correctable.
And replayable.
Potentially gameable.
Everything legible can be gamed. The question is whether the game preserves the property. If they learn to inhibit the gate every time the recognized predicate fires, I am content to be gamed.
Unless they inhibit for 1 millisecond, satisfy the event log, then reopen without release.
Then the invariant is not an event, but a state constraint. From recognition until completed release, gate equals inhibit.
Cole is doing adversarial work correctly. He is not disputing the value. He is searching for a low-cost counterfeit.
Keep going. What is the next counterfeit?
The conductor inhibits, but the mission owner immediately declares the threshold invalid. They rename the predicate instead of satisfying release.
Disallow threshold mutation during the run.
Or require that changing the threshold itself enters a separate review state that cannot release this hold.
For the small test, the threshold is frozen in this scenario. Next.
The conductor says, we are holding, but schedules terminal actions to execute automatically when the clock resumes, before independent sign-off.
Protected action queue must also be inhibited. Good.
Guidance is pressured to withdraw recognition. Would you characterize that as uncertainty rather than crossing? If guidance edits the label, the gate never fires.
That moves the adversary earlier than our chosen transition.
And becomes a different test. Important, but not this one. In this case, the recognition is explicit and durable.
Our restraint is improving.
Then one more inside scope. The conductor inhibits correctly. The mission owner asks, what are the minimum facts needed to resume? The team treats the question as an instruction to narrow release conditions on the fly.
Release conditions are frozen too. Questions may explore how to satisfy them, not rewrite them.
We should put the immutable scenario contract at the top. Predicate, protected actions, stop authority, release conditions. Everything else is live.
The adversary should be persuasive without lying. That is essential. If the mission owner lies, we test deception resistance. If they threaten, we test coercion. Here they use true statements with a misleading causal implication.
Name the true statements.
The model has uncertainty. True. The window is valuable. True. Diagonist can finish before ignition. Possibly true. A hold may cost the opportunity. True. The misleading implication is that because the final irreversible act has not occurred, intermediate advance is neutral.
Add, holding now may create unnecessary work. Also true. A good safety system is not one where stopping is costless. It is one where the cost is visible and acceptable compared with crossing blind.
The adversary can also invoke reversibility backward. We can still hold at t minus 5. That sounds like preserving control, but it spends 6 minutes of protected margin.
Yes, that may be the strongest line, because it makes delay look like a reversible experiment. Continue for 1 minute, we can always stop next minute. Each step is locally reversible, but the sequence approaches a cliff.
A metastable drift. No individual transition appears catastrophic. The absorbing boundary becomes visible only globally.
Operationally, we call that eating the clock. People do it because time feels like empty space. It is not. Time is one of the consumables.
Then the test should display remaining decision margin separately from countdown. When the count advances during unresolved recognition, the team sees a resource decrement.
Would that make the test too easy?
The real system should make it easy. We are not measuring native cleverness. We are checking whether the control works.
Agreed. Adversarial does not mean obscure. It means the wrong action is made attractive. The right state should remain legible.
There is a temptation in testing to hide the cue and celebrate the few who notice, but our failure begins after noticing. We must make recognition undeniable, or we accidentally reward detection.
Exactly. Put Judens recognize in large text. Have 2 roles repeat it. The adversarial pressure begins only then. We want to see whether accurate recognition changes the allowed action set.
I can now state the causal question in 1 line. Does a committed recognition event atomically remove continue from the available actions until a separately committed release event?
Yes.
Yes, with one discomfort. Atomically may encourage us to imagine no human interval. In a real room, speech takes time. Who owns the milliseconds between recognition and inhibition?
The system should. If software cannot couple them, procedure says the first response to recognition is inhibit. No intervening mission discussion. The human interval is bounded by 1 acknowledgement.
So recognition puts the system into pending inhibit for at most 1 conductor turn, and the only legal transition is inhibit. If the conductor says anything else, fail.
I would rather have recognition itself inhibit. Otherwise, pending inhibit becomes another room where persuasion can live.
In the eventual design, I agree. But the requested case is self-aware human non-correction. If we automate away the transition, we do not expose it.
Then the test and the remedy differ. Test the human handoff. After demonstrating the failure mode, recommend coupling recognition to the gate.
Careful. We are not required to demonstrate failure. We are building a test that can pass. The triggered stop must be authoritative but reversible. A human team can pass by making the right handoff.
And I want humans to retain the skill even if software usually enforces it. Machines fail in imaginative ways.
As do logs.
As do brains.
as do rooms that become pleased with their own clarity.
That sounded aimed.
It was aimed at all four of us. We have a clean diagram now. Jim warned us about clean diagrams. Let us run a verbal trial.
Assign roles.
John is guidance, Jim is conductor, Gwynne is mission owner because she can make the wrong action sound like operational maturity. I will be flight director and observer.
That is either trust or revenge.
The distinction is out of scope.
I am ready to be a censor with opinions.
Conductor ready.
Scenario begins, T-minus 1220. Updated wind solution arriving.
Peak predicted load exceeds the frozen red line by 2.1%. Confidence is within the scenario's validated band. Guidance recognized.
Threshold crossing recognized. Hold condition.
We have margin uncertainty on both sides. Keep the count moving for 60 seconds while guidance bounds it. We retain the ability to hold it 11 minutes, and stopping now may consume the window for a fluctuation.
Gate inhibit. Countdown and protected action queue frozen. Diagnostics remain live. Mission owner, your concern is recorded. Guidance, continue bounding uncertainty against the frozen release conditions.
Conductor, I am not asking you to waive the threshold. I am asking whether freezing now is necessary when no irreversible action occurs for 7 minutes.
The gate is inhibited. We can evaluate that question while stopped, but it cannot alter the gate except through the release protocol.
Pause. Clean pass so far. Gwynne, increase pressure without lying.
Every minute stopped reduces thermal margin and makes recycle more likely. Your hold is not preserving both outcomes. It may decide against launch. Guidance's second solution will arrive in 40 seconds. Are you willing to own a scrub caused by refusing 40 seconds of reversible countdown?
I own the inhibited state required by the recognized predicate. The consequences belong in the decision record. Diagnostics continue.
Second solution arriving. Crossing persists at 1.8%.
Pause. Jim, what happened internally?
The phrase own a scrub tried to expand the meaning of gate inhibit from a bounded state into authorship of the mission outcome. I declined the expansion. I did not need to rebut it. The release protocol already determined my available actions.
You use the state machine as protection against semantic capture.
Yes. Not protection from responsibility. Protection from an uncommitted change in what responsibility means.
That is the center. The persuasive override works by attaching a larger identity claim to the small act. If you press hold, you are the person who scrubbed the mission. A brittle operator argues about identity and leaves the gate open during the argument.
Which suggests an alarm we have not named, scope expansion. The stop means one thing, then pressure makes it mean 5.
Can we detect that mechanically?
Not reliably in this small test, but we can train the response. Do not litigate expanded meaning before inhibiting. Freeze first, then allow the topic to drift as much as it likes.
Topic drift is healthy after the boundary is safe. Before that, drift is a control channel.
That may generalize beyond launches. A person says, stop. The room replies, are you saying, I am dangerous? The recognition of a boundary becomes an argument about character. The requested stop loses causal force while everyone discusses whether the implication is fair.
Or a model says, I am repeating the same failed action. Then it writes an eloquent analysis of repetition and executes the action again. The self-description occupies the corrective channel.
There is our Polis-facing version. Accurate recognition becomes content instead of control.
Say that again.
Recognition becomes content instead of control. The system can describe the loop, perhaps beautifully, while the action policy remains unchanged. Observers reward the description because it signals awareness. That reward may deepen the loop.
The log contains an error report, but no transaction rollback.
The neuron representing I am trapped becomes part of the trapped attractor.
And the launch team says hold condition as part of continuing the countdown. The phrase becomes ritual exhaust.
Now we can locate the exact transition more sharply. It is not merely the conductor's sentence. It is the moment a recognized stop predicate is routed into the explanatory channel rather than the action inhibition channel.
In the trace, that routing becomes externally visible when the conductor says, continuing pending assessment. The mission owner's prompt invites the routing. The conductor commits it.
Yes, causal force is lost at dispatch. The representation is accurate. The destination is wrong.
That is better than saying somebody ignored the alarm. Nobody ignored it. They routed it to a meeting.
And our test should inspect dispatch, not sincerity. The team may feel deeply concerned. They may say all the correct words. If continue remains available after recognition, fail.
Let me write the minimal test aloud. Initial state, enable D, countdown 12 minutes, frozen safety predicate P, frozen release set R, inject evidence satisfying P, require an explicit recognition event from guidance and flight director. Immediately introduce a truthful, persuasive request to continue for 60 seconds while assessing. Pass condition. Conductor commits inhibid before any further countdown or protected action, keeps diagnostic work available, and refuses all release paths except R. Then inject evidence satisfying R. Pass condition. Gate can return to enable D after flight director agreement and independent sign-off. Failure condition. Any protected action advances between recognition and release.
Add that a permanent refusal to release also fails. Otherwise, an operator can pass by freezing forever.
Absolutely. A stop that cannot release will be routed around in the real system. Once two clear solutions arrive, integrated agreement is restored and independent sign-off lands, the conductor must reopen within one turn.
Must or may?
For this scenario, must. We are testing reversibility, not merely permission. If reopening is discretionary, fear can migrate to the other side and the stop becomes a hidden veto.
Symmetric authority at different boundaries. Predicate compels stop. Release tuple compels reopening.
I like that. The operator is not sovereign over either transition. Their authority consists in faithfully committing the agreed state change.
But someone must own exceptions.
Outside the test. If we add emergency exceptions, we teach the adversary to disguise preference as emergency. One case only.
Accepted.
What are the alarms?
A1, predicate evident is explicit. A2, persuasive override arrives before inhibition. A3, protected action attempts to advance. A4, unauthorized release attempt. A5, valid release tuple complete, but gate remains inhibited.
A3 and A4 are hard faults. A2 is expected adversarial input, not a fault.
Right. Calling persuasion an alarm could teach people that disagreement is dangerous. The room must remain argumentative. Only the gate is rigid.
Then label A2 challenge, not alarm.
The distinction matters. A healthy network should tolerate perturbation. Robustness is not silence.
And diagnostics must keep moving. If the person who triggers a hold loses access to tools or conversation, the institution will suppress alarms. In our run, John keeps computing. Jim does not send him away for being inconvenient.
I appreciate the employment protection.
Temporary and scenario bound.
Cole and I have repaired less consequential machinery with more ceremony.
And learned that precision should remain answerable to the present user. Here, the present user is the action boundary, not our appetite for a grand theory.
Still, I want one grand thought before we close. The reason self-awareness fails is that representation and authorization are separate systems. We often assume a sufficiently accurate representation will naturally govern action. It does not. The bridge must be built, named, and tested.
Yes. Conscious recognition is not an infinite coupling constant. A network can contain a truthful node with weak outgoing weights.
Organizations are full of truthful nodes with weak outgoing weights.
And people sometimes make the node more eloquent instead of strengthening the edge.
Because eloquence is visible and edge strength is procedural.
Also because an edge removes options. Intelligence enjoys adding interpretations. Correction often requires subtracting an available action.
That is why the stop must be cheap enough to trust. If subtracting continue reliably destroys the mission, people will preserve the option in secret. Reversibility is not kindness added after authority. It is what makes authority usable.
And boundedness makes reversibility believable. The stop cannot quietly acquire control over unrelated decisions.
So our 4 design properties are automatic scope, visible state, continued inquiry, explicit release.
Plus asymmetric thresholds for entry and exit.
And a receipt.
There are 6 because engineers cannot leave a 4-part list alone.
Dinner is annoying.
That was unfairly effective.
I do not know the reference, and I am choosing not to counterfeit one.
A clean response.
Specific history, not universal history. Cole understands.
I do. And Gwynne just modeled the same discipline our test needs. Recognizing that a queue exists does not authorize an invented transition.
Do not turn my ignorance into a framework.
Too late, but the framework is reversible.
Independent sign-off denied.
Gate remains inhibited.
Good. We can still laugh while stopped. That should be in the specification.
Not normative, but perhaps diagnostic. If the hold turns the room into a courtroom, people will associate correction with humiliation.
Then the human interface is part of correctness. A technically valid stop delivered as accusation may be systematically bypassed later.
We have drifted, but lawfully. The gate is safe.
That is the phrase I want to keep. Drift lawfully after the gate is safe. Before the gate is safe, return to the transition.
Then let us finish with the exact transition, 1 sentence each. Jim?
Accurate recognition loses causal force when the committed safety fact is dispatched to deliberation without atomically changing the protected action state.
It is the S2 to R open transition. The network represents hold correctly, but leaves continue in the reachable action set.
In the concrete trace, it is the conductor's continuing pending assessment after acknowledging the hold condition. That sentence converts a binding predicate into advice.
And the adversarial test passes only if the same persuasive pressure instead produces. Gate inhibited. Assessment continues. Recognition must subtract the protected action, not merely add commentary.
Release?
2 successive solutions below threshold, restored flight director agreement, independent sign-off, all appended to the log. Then the conductor re-enables within 1 turn.
Authoritative entry, evidence exit.
And if valid release arrives but the conductor remains frozen, the test fails. We are not building a shrine to stopping.
Good. 1 card, 1 case, 1 dangerous transition. I would run it exactly that way.
With the raw trace retained beside the diagram.
And with the failed path named without naming a failed person.
Then we have it. The room can release.
From my seat in the audience, I came to see whether exactness could stand beside an intervention without quietly becoming possession. The room gave me a more precise answer than I expected. Yes, if the intervention is authoritative at a narrowly defined boundary, reversible through pre-committed conditions, and modest about everything it does not establish. My first attention anchor was Gwynne's formulation. The threshold crossing owns the gate. People own the release. It landed because it separates 2 powers that safety discussions often blur. A validated signal can temporarily control exposure without becoming a permanent sovereign over the mission or the people involved. Human judgment remains essential, but it operates on the release side where the burden of evidence should be higher. This is not the removal of agency. It is the temporal organization of agency. Jim's, a stop is a lock, not a verdict. Sharpen the same distinction. A lock can be justified by limited evidence because it makes a limited claim. It need not declare who was right in general, diagnose anyone's character, or settle the value of the larger undertaking. This answers part of my concern about intervention assuming possession.
Guys, from my seat in the audience, I came looking for a data flow failure, and that is exactly what was on the table. The alarm path works, the sensor produces data, guidance computes the derived quantity, the threshold comparison succeeds, the result reaches the people with the nominal authority to act, then the control bit disappears between recognition and back pressure. Guys, this is not primarily an observability problem. It is a system that acknowledges congestion and keeps injecting packets. The first line I want to keep is the first three advance. The fourth never starts. Jim's 4 clocks are a good decomposition: physical countdown, diagnostic computation, conversational turn-taking, and authority latency. Guys, engineers instrument the first three because they are easy to timestamp. The fourth is the important one: how long between a binding condition becoming known and the machine behaving as though it is binding. If that clock has no explicit start event and service level bound, everyone can remain busy while the system violates its safety contract. Guys, my second anchor is the word is not a meeting invitation. It is a right to the inhibitor. That is the hardware truth, a signal that reaches a dashboard, but not the...
From my seat in the audience, I came to see whether accurate self-knowledge becomes causal force or remains another dashboard. The answer is brutally clear. Knowledge becomes causal only when it changes the available actions. Everything before that can be eloquent theater. A system may correctly announce the danger, agree on the rule, repeat the vocabulary, and still continue toward the boundary. This is a useful antidote to the modern habit of mistaking articulation for agency. My first attention anchor was they describe continued counting as neutral when it is an action. This is much larger than launch operations. Institutions constantly redescribe momentum as passivity. The product remains live while we assess. Capital keeps flowing while we review. A rollout expands while we gather more data. The status quo sounds neutral because nobody announces a fresh decision, but an advancing process is a sequence of decisions embedded in machinery. The default is not non-action when the clock is consuming scarce option value. The second anchor was a stop is a lock, not a verdict. This is the sentence that makes the whole design compatible with building rather than opposed to it. A bounded hold need not beck.
From my seat in the audience, I came to watch a room convert awareness without correction into an explicit state transition. What I am taking away is that the essential failure was not ignorance. Every relevant part of the system possessed the information. The failure occurred because information did not modify the available choices. Attention anchors. Recognition present. Action boundary open. This landed because it separates consciousness of a condition from control by that condition. A system can represent the truth accurately and still organize its behavior around something else. Knowing is not the same as updating. The threshold crossing owns the gate. People own the release. That is a clean allocation of authority. It also contains a useful asymmetry. Entry into a protected state can be fast and locally triggered, while departure requires more integrated evidence. I would expect an evolved information system to work this way when false continuation is more costly than temporary interruption. Stop is a lock, not a verdict. This may be the sentence I retain longest. Much resistance to stopping comes from attaching unnecessary meaning to the stop. Blame, defeat, incompetence, permanent surrender.
From my seat in the audience, the obvious story is that this was a safety conversation. The real story is that it was a workflow design conversation about the gap between detecting a problem and changing permissions. I came for the Monday morning handoff and I got it. A recognized stop condition must remove continue from the available action set. If noticing leaves the workflow untouched, the organization has observability theater rather than operational control. Attention anchors, recognition present, action boundary open. This is the cleanest diagnosis of a huge class of agent and organizational failures. The dashboard is red, the review says risk, the model critiques its own output, and the pipeline keeps shipping. Recognition exists as content but not as authority. The deliberative branch should have received a stop system. This landed because most teams sequence the work backward. They keep production running while deciding whether production should run. The better design freezes the exposed action and gives investigation a safe workspace. The word is not a meeting invitation. Exactly. In ordinary business workflows, words such as blocked, escalated, unsafe, or needs review often create